Welcome to my tutorial for the Ninja Savior's Return of the Warriors for PlayStation 4 and Switch. It should be the exact same gameplay between the two systems. I don't think it's going to be any different. So, yeah, the basics here are going to be about crowd control, pretty much. You know, that's going to be the main way to beat this on hard. But it's really not that hard, but there are a few tricky sequences that go on for a while, some pretty long checkpoints. You basically get a checkpoint for each area you clear before the arrow shows up to tell you to go to the next area. So once you pass that arrow, you're into the next checkpoint. That's basically how it works. You don't have any lives, but if you die, you'll have unlimited continue, so you can always restart at the last section you made it to. See, after that arrow, that's the next checkpoint. I believe that's usually how it works. I think that's how the checkpoints are divided up. But I didn't die on, there's a lot of areas where I never died. So I didn't completely test that. But yeah, on hard mode, I died about 14 times after playing through normal twice to unlock both unlockable characters, which I don't even recommend doing. If you're just trying to beat hard, you really don't need the other two characters. I didn't find that they were as useful to me as this ninja character, which is what I recommend using. I recommend using this character. He does a lot of damage, and he's great for grabbing and throwing enemies, which is great for crowd control. So, yeah, it makes it a lot easier to deal with the enemies, I think. Picking up those energy pickups by standing over them, and I believe to pick up items you have to be pressing, you have to be walking forward, pressing forward and punch at the same time over an object. It's a little bit different than what's normal in these types of games where you just press punch when you're standing over something. So for a while I used to punch at the objects and I couldn't pick them up, but I think if you walk toward them while pressing punch, that fixes it. So yeah, if you press, I believe it's forward and X, you'll do your dash move that you see me doing a lot, and that'll close the distance, which is, really important to get close to the enemies. As well as if you press punch at the end of that, I believe it does a ram, like a shoulder ram type of move. Another very important move is, in order to grab enemies, you just walk up to them, and if you're close enough while walking, you'll instantly grab them. Then you can do various types of throws. If you press up and punch while you have someone grabbed, you'll do a spinning throw that damages enemies around you, which is great. You'll see me do that a lot to crowd control and keep enemies back. For this guy, there's a sweet spot where if you stand and punch with Ninja, you'll get your nunchuck hits in and some punches. But see, when he starts landing hits on you, immediately dash out of the way, otherwise you're just going to trade punches with him. So you got to find that sweet spot where you can punch him, but he can't hit you. See, like I'm in that range right now where I'm hitting him, but he's not hitting me. And you try to stay in that range. You got to kind of fuck around to get that range. Practice to try to get that sweet spot, but you get the idea. And if he does land a single punch on you, just, dash out of the way. Just get out of there, because then you're just going to exchange hits with each other until you die, most likely. So just keep that in mind. Now, if you press down and X, you do a body slam that you see that I just used to finish off the boss. That can be sometimes useful to damage enemies that are troublesome, that are like inching off the edge of the screen and then retreating back to the borders of the screen to hide. Sometimes it's good to get those guys. But, yeah, when you grab enemies, you have a few types of throws. If you press down and punch when you have somebody grabbed, you'll break them over your knee, and that does the most damage, it seems. So use that if you want to just damage an enemy. But you won't hit other people around you with that. I do believe there's invincibility frames during throws, so use that to your advantage to not take damage as well, if you need to dodge something. And of course, throwing enemies into each other just to move them out of your way. You're going to want to be doing that on both sides of your body. Now, as far as when you're spinning the enemy and doing the spin throw, I think you can control what direction you release the guy on by holding the direction you want to release him on. I believe that's how it's done. There is no controls list in the game, so, I mean, that would have been useful, but I figured it out by just fucking around the moves. There's also the regular throw, as you see, which is just a standard throw. You just slam the guy to the ground, and you can hit other guys with it. But the spinning throw is much more useful to hit guys all around you. There's also your special move where you jump up in the air and shoot a blue flame down at the ground, and it kind of clears the screen and does a lot of damage. You press circle, I believe, to do that. If you press in, I believe you have to hold up as well, but if you press and hold up, and then your attack button, you'll see a nunchuck icon appears below where your power bar is. And that'll allow you to do a nunchuck move, which I mainly only use to take down robots that are in the air. It's great for that. I don't use it that much during regular combat, but it can be good for the robots that you can't damage any other way by either throwing. You have to either throw the robot or hit it with the nunchuck, it seems. Or a power move, but you don't have many. The power move takes a while to charge up. Your power move charges up by charging up that max bar at the bottom. That just charges up from not getting hit, I believe, for a certain amount of time. Or just hitting enemies may charge it up faster, but I'm not sure about that. But I know if you don't get hit for a while, it will charge up. If you do take a hit, I believe it will eventually deplete completely. But yeah, so that's pretty much, that's mainly it for the moves. I mean, you can crouch and punch. There's some other basics. It doesn't seem like you can jump in the game. The only way to jump is by doing that, which you just saw me hover. But that was done because of a cutscene. But the way you do that, you just press X and you'll hover in the air briefly. I guess that's the closest you can get to a jump. And it's slow, so if you try to do it when a knife is coming at you, you got to do it early, or you won't get out of the way of the knife. So it's not that useful. I barely even use the attack that comes with it, because while you're hovering, you can do a punching attack in the air, but I found it pretty useless. Now for that robot you just saw me kill, you cannot defeat them by punching them. So you got to either throw shit at them, which could either be enemies or objects you pick up, or you have to just grab them and throw them. And I recommend the best way to damage them when grabbing them is to grab them and then press down and punch to slam them over your knee. That does the most damage for a throw. It won't hit the guys around them, but it will do the most damage to them. And it takes maybe 4 throws like that to kill one of them. So I recommend using that and throwing enemies at them or throwing any objects. If you dash in close to them, they're pretty slow, so you usually have enough time to walk up to them and grab them. You also, with this guy, he has a nunchuck attack that if you're punching for a while and you're hitting enemies, the nunchucks come out. It's not your nunchuck special, but it's another nunchuck, like regular punching move, and it will hit guys behind you as well as in front of you. And your nunchuck special does that as well, so things to keep in mind. For these fans, you can't dash through them because the dash isn't invincible like I thought it might be. So I was trying to see if I could dash through the blades, but you can't do that. So when they're spinning, just don't go through them. Let the enemies come into them and get cut up. I guess the best way to deal with these enemies. But yeah, there is no up and down movement as far as being able to move up in the environment or down like in Streets of Rage and a normal beat 'em up. It's just left to right movement. So it's pretty simple in that regard, but there is definitely some crowd control that you have to do. But this game is much fucking easier than Mother Russia Bleeds on hardcore and Streets of Rage 3 on normal. Both which I have videos posted up for. I know I have a tutorial posted up for Streets of Rage 3 to explain how to beat it. But for Mother Russia Bleeds, I don't know if I ever did a tutorial, but I have a playthrough up. So check those out if you're interested in a much harder beat 'em up. This game really isn't difficult from that perspective. As long as you can manage the crowds and you know what kind of attacks work on certain types of enemies better. Once you have all that down, you just mix and match it as needed, and you can deal with whatever shows up. It's really just about trying to keep the enemies on both sides off of you, and if you can, try to consolidate the enemies into one neat pile on one side of the screen so you can smash them all at the same time. Now, for a lot of these bosses, including this one, grab and then slam against your knee, and just keep spamming that shit, because these enemies are very easy to grab, a lot of these bosses. See how much damage I already did? So, try to do that. When he gets off screen, he can be more dangerous, as you see, and it'll probably end up getting me hit, but also, don't forget you can throw enemies into the boss by doing your spin throw or your regular throw, and that'll do a little chip damage. But, that's not really the main thing. The main thing is you should try to let the boss come into the middle of the screen and grab and slam him on your knee. That's going to do the most damage. And, use that run dash to get in close if you need to. Don't worry about the enemies too much with this guy. Just concentrate on slamming the boss on your knee again and again. And it'd be very easy to kill. And for most of these human-sized bosses, or regular-sized bosses, you can, do different variations of that. Sometimes you may have to do a little bit more crowd control, but that's the basic idea with most of the bosses. There's only a few boss fights that could be a little tricky, but I didn't find any of them to be too hard. You have a lot of shit here in the beginning that you can just pick up and throw, so, utilize that for some quicker kills. With these flying guys, the nunchuck works very well, and you don't have to wait for them to come down. If you use the nunchuck special, you can use that too, that blue flame special, but it doesn't always hit them, because if they're too high up, it won't make contact. But the nunchuck always will if you use the nunchuck special, where you hold up and then press the attack button. You hold up and wait for it to show the nunchuck icon on the bottom, then you hit the attack button. You can only do it when your max bar there is filled to a certain amount. But it works very well to take these guys out of the air. No matter what height they are on the screen, you can hit them with the nunchuck with that move. Other than that, you have to wait for them to descend, and then you can hit them. But, sometimes they stay up for a while. They can be a pain in the ass because they'll shoot at you. These guys, you also kind of want to consolidate to one side if you can, because they're going to throw knives at you from across the screen. And, you have a large distance to traverse to catch up with one of them, so you don't really want them to be too far apart. If a knife comes at you, you can hit jump and hover briefly and let the knife go under you, but you have to time it very early, because the hover is very slow to start up. Try to keep all these enemies on one side of the screen and, just beat the shit out of them. They have a hard time getting through these punches and these kind of hits. So just mash once you got them all cornered. It's going to be pretty much the same tactics for a lot of these enemies. I mean, some of them, these women with the swords are more nimble, but you're still going to be trying to consolidate them to one side of the screen. And of course, use your nunchucks when you're around these aerial guys. Try to take these guys out as soon as possible with your nunchuck, or if they get low enough, try to hit them. But if they're not, then just use that nunchuck special. It does get a little trickier later on with some longer checkpoints with a lot of enemies, but I found hard mode to be overall pretty easy compared to, how hard some beat-em-ups can be in games in general. But like I said, it took me maybe around an hour and 24 minutes after beating normal twice, so it wasn't too difficult. Don't be afraid to use that screen clearing move fairly frequently when it fills up, because eventually if you don't use it and you go between screens, a lot of times it resets and then you lose it anyway. So, don't try to save it for super long. You don't have to save it all the way up for a boss or anything. It doesn't really work well on any of the bosses anyway, so don't worry about using it on the bosses. It's kind of mostly useless on boss fights. So yeah, use all the items here to throw blocks at the enemies and shit like that, and throw the enemies at each other. See, I'd use the hover move there to dodge that knife. You can do that, but it's not the easiest thing to do, so it's better just to try to wipe those guys out. As soon as you see them, they should be the priority guys to take out the knife guys. I always try to take them out first. Also, these guys I try to take out early as well. Like, these guys are a priority enemy because they're low to the ground, and you can only hit them at like low attacks like ducking punch or charge. So standing punch doesn't work, at least with ninja it doesn't. So I like to take them out first because they can cause a lot of problems. These guys are pretty easy. These suit wearing guys. So just wait for them to jump in and then just counter them and finish them off. Most of the enemies can be managed in a very similar way with the crowd control. Like, Most of them, you can fight them very similar. You don't have to really change tactics too much. The weak little soldier guys only take one punch each, so you don't have to mash the buttons on them. You can just punch them once and move on. This is another easy boss that you can just grab and slam onto your knee. You see how much damage that does, and it's easy to grab the boss and do that. When he climbs onto the wall, you can't hit him, so try to dodge those bombs by staying in the middle of them. But if not, don't worry about it. They don't do that much damage, and you're going to do a lot more damage to the boss if you're getting those slams in. Don't bother trying to punch these guys too much. Just focus on grabbing and slamming them into your knee. Sometimes I accidentally do a regular throw, but it doesn't always respond for me for whatever reason. But I would say just keep doing that knee slam, down and throw. These claw guys, they can be a nuisance, but you shouldn't be fighting this guy for too long if you're constantly grabbing him. There's a tricky fight coming up where you fight two of those large giants at the same time, and that can be tricky, but there's good ways to deal with that as well. It's not too bad. It didn't take me too many tries, but I could see somebody getting stuck on it for a while, but I have a decent general strategy for them. So yeah, more of the same here. These red guys can be problematic, especially when a lot of them show up because they breathe fire. So I would say the red guys are the priority in this area. So take out those red guys first as soon as you see them. And the other enemies are going to be pretty standard. I guess the women with the swords might be the second priority to wipe out, but definitely those red guys. Definitely use shit to throw it, throw all those things at the enemies because it hurts the robot a good deal. You may want to clear out some enemies first before trying to grab the robot. It makes it easier. And then just slam them on your knee. About 4 knee slams I think will kill one. So, maybe 3. But that's the general idea. You can also do the spin throw with the robots and take out enemies around you, but you don't really need to do that. I would just go for the more powerful knee slam because the regular enemies are so fucking easy in this area that you don't really need to worry about that. The spin throw is a good deal weaker than the knee slam, but it does clear out enemies. It keeps enemies off your ass, but you don't always need it when the enemies are so easy. Grab these giant balls and throw them at the enemies. And for these aerial robots, again, try to save your power bar and just use your nunchucks on them when they show up. I use my screen clearing flame move, but see, it misses some of them sometimes, so it's not a good way to deal with these guys. So if you want to deal with them reliably, use the nunchuck special. This can be a little tricky because there's a lot of those red guys that show up, which when you fight them in a big number, they're a pain in the ass because they will just keep flaming you and knocking you down. So be aware of them. You may want to do some crowd control shit. I didn't play this part too well. I barely survived this part in this playthrough. But I think I beat it my first time getting to it. I just barely survived. So I mean, it wasn't that hard, but you can get knocked into a bad loop. And of course, if you fail this, then you're going to be sent all the way back to the beginning of this stage again. I believe that was the last checkpoint, so you don't really want to die here. Try to grab at least one enemy and throw it at the guys and try to knock them all into one nice little consolidated pile so you can just beat the shit out of all of them at once. Of course, you can't do that with the robot. You can't just punch the crowd with the robot and damage him. But you can knock him back while you hit the other enemies. And then once the other enemies are gone, you can deal with the robot by either throwing him or using a nunchuck special or something like that. So here they add a little background element where there's a guy with a gun in the background, a big machine. but it doesn't make things much more difficult. There's a few cover spots that you can take. He only shoots basically when you're by these two specific cars. So yeah, use these motorcycles and shit like that to throw everything at the enemies. And at this point, you're pretty much dealing with the basic mix-up of enemies. Great game, though. I definitely recommend it. But if you're going to spend $20 on it for the digital version, then just be aware that you can easily beat the game within an hour on normal. Or maybe, for me, it was an hour and 20 minutes my first time. But, you know, around there. So if you're not playing, if you don't like to replay games a little bit, then, you know, you may only get about an hour and a half out of the game. So if you're going to go through hard, then you may spend another hour and a half on that, hour and 20 minutes or whatever. It depends. I mean, it may take you a while if you're not good at these kind of games. So, I mean, playtime will vary, but I did 2 playthroughs on normal because I wanted to unlock the other characters and see if I liked them, but I didn't end up liking the other characters from what I tried, so this seemed like the best character to me to use for a first playthrough. But yeah, if you take cover behind these vehicles, you know, you can avoid damage from the gunfire until he blows up both vehicles. I didn't take cover there. I was kind of just fucking around. I mean, my health was pretty good anyway, so I didn't really care too much, but it's only a slight nuisance. It doesn't really cause much of a problem. It does very little damage. The only difference I really noticed from hard is maybe the enemies are more aggressive and they dodge more. And I think you take more damage, but there's also a lot more enemies in certain parts that I noticed, it seemed. But it doesn't make the game as much harder as you would think it is because you can use a lot of the same tactics that you use on normal. So, you know, you may die more often in certain parts, but you know, I didn't find it much harder. There are some long checkpoints that I could see people struggling with. If you're barely surviving, then yeah, you're going to probably have a problem with some parts of this mode. But it's basically just a matter of getting all the different tactics down for different enemies, how to deal with them, and putting it all together. So same thing with this guy. Just grab him and slam him over your knee again and again. That's going to be the main strategy. It does get trickier when these robots come out because they block your way. So, you know, be aware of that. Sometimes you can smack this guy around with regular hits if you're dealing with other enemies and he gets in the way. You know, you can do a little extra damage that way, but the main way to damage him would be to grab him and slam him over your knee. You can also use these robots, and you know, if you want to get them out of the way, use that spin throw and, you know, throw them out of the way. But they do tend to cover up where the boss is hiding. So once you get the boss in a corner like this, I find the best way to hit him off screen is to do this spinning move that you saw me do there. You know, grab an enemy and just do that spinning move again and again, and you'll do multiple hits worth of damage while he's in that corner. So just keep doing that. You tend to grab them pretty quickly when you work around in that corner. So just keep grabbing the enemies and spin throwing them if you get him in that corner with the boss. And you should be able to finish him off pretty easily. But yeah, most of this is going to be learning, you know, what tactics you're going to use for different enemies. And then when the enemies are mixed, you know, you're going to combine those tactics and use crowd control to keep enemies off of you. And shit like that. That's going to be the basics of this kind of game. You know, and if you're having trouble, then, you know, analyze what you're doing and, you know, think about it more as far as if you're, you know, using a method that's getting you hit a lot, think about how you can deal with the enemies better. You know, and then put it all together. But, you know, even on hard, the enemies they don't hit you super fast. Like, if you play something like Streets of Rage 3, even on normal, I mean, like, the enemies hit you immediately pretty much as soon as you're on the same plane as them. And it's relentless. But this game is not, you know, this game really never gets hard. You know, the enemies are still kind of slow compared to those games, so. You know, after playing those games, I found this to be easy. So yeah, you're going to deal with a lot of enemies here, and then you're going to deal with one of the early bosses of the game, the large enemy. I think it might be the first time he appears in a regular in the middle of a level. I recommend saving your power meter and filling it up fully so you can get one of those area attacks, that blue flame move, as soon as he appears. That way you get a little extra damage on him, and then you're just going to deal with him as you normally would. You know, keep punching at him and nunchucking him in that sweet spot until he lands a hit on you. If he lands even a single hit on you, then, you know, move out, reset your positioning, and then try it again. Try to get in that sweet spot again, and just keep doing that. If you're not in that little sweet spot, you know, where you're getting those hits in, and you're exchanging shots with him, then he's going to win that fight, because he's going to knock your health meter down before you knock his down. You know, unless you've already wounded him a lot. But most of the time, it's not worth exchanging hits with him, so if you get hit once, just get out of there, use the dash, and just reset. Soon you are going to be fighting two of these sentinel guys, or these large giant guys at the same time. And that can be tricky, but it's the same kind of strategy with using those sweet spots. And with Ninja, he can hit the bosses on both sides of the screen. So you can hit the left one and the right one at the same time if you get right in the middle. So you can do like double damage by doing that. So I'll explain that a little bit more on that fight. As you can see, getting all these guys into one neat little corner like this, piled up together, a lot of times there's really no strategy but just punching the shit out of the corner, and you can destroy all the guys. So remember that. Remember to use that tactic. It's always good to try to get all the guys on one side of the screen by throwing them to the corner. You know, just throw them to the same side and get them in the same area if you can. Use the dash to get ahead of all of them so you can have them all on one side of you. You know, either the right side or the left side. And then you can just knock them all into that corner. It's a good technique that works well for most of the game. If there's other moves, I don't know about them because, you know, there was no move list and I couldn't find anything online, so, you know, there may be some other moves. But it's pretty sufficient. The only thing is you don't really have a good way to dodge things like knives because your hover move is so slow. You know, you can hover for a brief moment, but it takes a while to start up, and if you don't do it really early, the knife will hit you. So that's about the only, issue I had control-wise. But normally I try to take out these knife guys as fast as possible so they don't have much of a chance to throw knives at me. Those are always the first guys I take out when I see them. They're pretty much always the priority. And like these red guys would be a priority enemy as well. But if the knife guy was there, I would go for the knife guy first. Because they cause me more of a problem if I don't deal with them. Again, always throw these boxes and shit at enemies. And after you throw that yellow box at an enemy twice, you usually get an energy pickup to refill your health. So always remember, too, to be conservative with health items, you know, if you're having trouble, because that's pretty much something that works on all these old games. You know, if you have a health item on the floor, don't pick it up until you're going to go to the next part of the screen, you know, and scroll it off the screen, because you want to kill all the enemies first. They don't go away if you leave them on the ground, so just... The only way you'll lose the health item is if you scroll the screen off and you scroll it off the screen. But aside from that, you know, save it up for when you need it. Because if you just consume it when you're only losing a little bit of health, you know, then you're not going to have it when you want it. Some of these areas are pretty long, so conserving the health items can keep you alive. But yeah, you had to deal with some of those red guys, multiple of them, so that can be a little tricky. You got a lot of knife guys here, so try to take them out as soon as you can. Cracking them over your knee with that down throw move is a good way to deplete their health faster. You don't always have to throw them at each other, you know, because it does less damage. I mean, it will move them out of the way, but sometimes it's good just to slam them over the knee and kill, you know, deplete their health a little bit more. But try to keep them all on one side, as you see me doing. Now, with these claw guys, I try to, you know, I would take out that knife guy probably first, and then if I see any claw guys, I'd make them the next priority, because they're very annoying. But like I said, I find the knife guys to be probably the most annoying enemy because you don't really have a good move to dodge it. See, it takes very long, that startup. Well, I'm trying to do that startup on that hover to dodge the knife. It just, if you don't do it early enough, you get hit. So, for that reason, I like to take them out first. Now, this is one of the harder bosses as well. But it's going to be the same kind of tactic of grabbing him and slamming him over your knee. But it can still be tricky because there ends up being a lot of enemies, if I remember right. And he can be a little tricky. He has some moves that can hit you easily. So, try to grab him when you can and slam him over your knee. Use your power move, when you can, because you can, clear out some of the regular enemies, which just get in the way while you're trying to grab this guy. Also, don't hang out too much near the left or right extremes of the screen, because if the boss is behind the left or right side of the screen, he'll get in hits and you won't be able to reach him because the screen will block you. As with most of these old beat-em-ups, I'm sure you already know that, but, depends how familiar you are with these games, but, it's pretty basic. But yeah, I mean, just try to ignore the other enemies as much as you can and focus on slamming the guy against your knee and doing the most damage. But the claw guys can be very annoying. When he does the flame, just be in the gap where the flame's not showing and you'll dodge it. But it can be hard to dodge it when all this other shit is going on. Now you got more of these red guys that show up at a certain point. And those guys you probably want to kill fast because they're a pain in the ass. And then you got knife guys. That's what makes this fight kind of hard, is you have the claw, the knife, and the red guys. 3 of the hardest enemies to deal with. So, it can make it difficult. But as long as you're aggressive with trying to grab him and slam him over your knee, you should be able to get him before he gets you. It's not a great strategy or anything, but it should be good enough. I didn't refine or master any techniques on the bosses because I only played through this game 3 times, twice on normal and once on hard. And of course there's no save or load states to practice each section on this, so it's not on an emulator, so. Yeah, so it's going to progressively get more difficult. There's going to be certain sections that are harder. But, yeah, nothing too hard here in this first section. You now have these little robots that, these droids that move along the floor. They really don't seem to do much of anything, though, so... just deal with them when you have a chance. They're actually good to use to throw at other enemies. That's about all they really... The only purpose they really serve. They don't seem to really do much to you. Maybe they do, but I didn't really notice them damaging me usually, so... I didn't consider them any kind of threat. The sword women are pretty agile, but, you've been dealing with a shitload of them. They're pretty easy to smash. And again, you have a lot of shit here to just pick up and throw at the enemies. There's these turret gun tank little things, but for some reason they're not active, so you can just throw them at the enemies. Now you have a red robot to deal with. I think they're a little bit more difficult than the regular ones. But they also have a laser. I don't know if the yellow ones had the laser, but the laser can be a bit annoying. It can do good damage if you get hit by it a lot, but it's going to be the same strategy of trying to get in close to them and slam them over your knee, or use these other enemies and use your spinning throw to hit them. That's also very useful. But I mainly focus on trying to grab the red robot when I can and bust it over my knee. You can also use this nunchuck to do some decent damage. the nunchuck special will damage the robots pretty good. So it's good to use sometimes as a finisher. Yeah, so now you fight these two large giants. And this can be one of the harder boss fights, but if you try it enough, you should get it eventually. You're going to want to stay in a sweet spot where you're hitting both enemies at the same time. And if you can get in the middle of them and do it, it's even better because you get double the damage. So keep that in mind. Try to keep just enough distance to be in that sweet spot and hit them, you know, without them exchanging shots with you. Like I said, if they land one shot on you, you're going to do the same strategy and dash out of the way and reset your position. See, as soon as I get hit, you know, I mean, I didn't have to leave there because the guys kind of moved back, but you do want to reset your position if you're getting hit. You don't want to, you know, if you get hit once, it's time to, like, either move away and reset your position or let them move back. You know, and then you can still hit them from where you're standing, but it just depends on where they're moving as well, but yeah, as long as you keep that in mind, you try to hit both of them at the same time, you know, because the nunchuck hits good on both sides with the regular attack, so you keep at it, eventually you should get through. It may take you some attempts if you're having trouble with it, but you could probably beat this boss fight just on luck, just by doing this basic strategy enough times. So it shouldn't be too hard. Now, of course, if you're using a different character, the strategies are probably going to be very different. So that's why I'm just showing how to beat hard mode. And I recommend using this character to beat hard mode. I did try, like, I didn't even try all the characters. I think I tried maybe 3 of the other characters, like, very briefly. So, you know, I'm sure I didn't get a good idea of. But the ones I tried, you know, didn't seem as powerful. I mean, there was Raiden, who I unlocked by beating normal twice. And it's a massive mech, but it did seem powerful, but it's so slow and it doesn't seem able to really dodge anything. It's a very different playstyle. So I was more comfortable with just playing as this character. Since I used this character for my normal playthroughs, I just ended up sticking with this character. Maybe I'll try playing through with some other characters, you know, in future videos. I may also try time attack mode since I can beat, you know, most of the levels without dying. So, at least on normal. I did beat several of the levels on hard without dying as well. But that would take a little bit more practice, I think. So yeah, here you have to worry about these missiles coming down, but they don't come down that frequently. So just, you know, if you see a shadow on the ground, move away from it, because that's where the missile is going to land. Again, use your nunchucks for these aerial guys to take them out reliably. If you have the nunchuck special, of course. Sometimes that body slam is useful that you saw me do down in X, but yeah, see that. But you don't see me using it too much because I didn't find it to be that worthwhile. I'd rather just, you know, try grabbing people and throwing them at each other most of the time. Or doing that knee slam. You got these glowing characters, troll-looking characters. But as long as you just stand and punch around their general vicinity, they usually get caught up in your punches. They don't provide much of a challenge, so I don't even really have different strategies for them, except that I don't usually try to grab them because they seem a lot harder to grab. So when I see those guys, I usually just try to punch them. But, yeah, not much of a change in strategy. See, I used the nunchuck special there and took out 3 of the robot flying enemies at once, which is very useful. You really don't want to let them linger around for too long because they can cause a lot of problems. You see, I'm saving the energy in the corner there for a little while because I didn't want to pick it up until I needed it. You want to try to conserve those. I think soon you're going to have some longer checkpoints that get a little challenging. This might be... I think this checkpoint's pretty challenging. You have to deal with a lot of enemies, if I remember right. So, you know, try to prioritize the enemies that give you the most trouble. For me, it's the claw guys, you know, first probably, and then the red guys. But then eventually there's going to be robots that show up. So, you're going to want to deal with those as well. I mean, the robots don't always cause much of a problem, but if you let them linger around too long, they'll do some laser moves and shit that, you know, can be problematic when you're trying to fight the other enemies. But a lot of times you can deal with the regular enemies and then save the robots for last and then deal with them last. But I usually mix it up a little bit. I'll usually try to get the robots in a grab whenever I can and slam them. Of course, if you can get the enemies to one side of the screen, like I said, you can punch the shit out of them, aside from the robots. Also, if you have claw enemies off the screen, then you have to duck and punch, because you can only hit them with a duck punch or a low attack. Same with these droids. Or grab, of course, but sometimes the claw guys are hard to grab. For this part, you may just want to throw these droids at the robots and do a lot of damage that way with your spin throws. And then mop up the remaining damage on these yellow robots. Use one of your specials or try to grab and slam them if you can. But yeah, it's easy if you know what to expect and you just stay in the middle and, you know, just use some crowd control techniques to keep the robots off of your ass. But this can be a tricky checkpoint. I think I died here once initially on hard. Because it goes on for a little while. You still don't have the checkpoint yet. You still have to kill all these enemies in the elevator. So, you know, if you don't have a lot of health, you know, you can fuck up here. Right. Same type of thing. Try to keep the enemies on one side as much as you can and just smash the shit out of them. Now you still don't have a checkpoint yet, so you still have to clear out this next group of enemies. I believe after you clear out all these assholes, you'll get the checkpoint. But you see it was getting a little wild here, and I almost fucked up again. But use your crowd control moves and try to keep them in one corner. Same strategies. The enemies will kind of jump into your punches and nunchucks with this character, so he has that going for him. He's actually really good with that. So now you have a checkpoint. I think you get the checkpoint. Yeah, I believe this is the checkpoint. But you're going to be fighting, you know, more groups of enemies. Save those energies. If you need them, pick them up, because your life is probably going to be low. Punching on both sides is a good way to manage the enemies in this room. They fall for that. They'll land right into your punches pretty much, so just face the enemy that's coming at you and just keep punching, and you'll wipe them out with your punches and regular nunchuck attacks. So yeah, now you have to clear out a few waves of enemies in this area before the boss. But it's going to be the same strategies. Yeah, and this is the checkpoint right here, where these women appear. If you die, you'll start back here, and then you got to kill these women again, and then you'll go right to the boss. So it's not too far back from where the boss is at. Very easy. You also have some knife guys to deal with, but and other assholes. I would say save up your screen clearing attack for this wave with the claw guys and the wrestlers, since that's the most annoying one, you know, for me at least. The screen clearing move is not really very useful on bosses, so no need to hang on to it. So now here's the boss. It's going to be the same thing, just grab and slam against your knee again, you know, just keep doing that. try to get in on the boss whenever you can and just do that knee slam. It does a lot of damage. Throw that container at him, too, for a little extra damage. You can do all that early on. You can do 2 knee slams and 1 container throw to start the fight off, and his health will be low, as you see. Well, not low, but you'll have a nice reduction on his health to start the fight off with. Here I was trying to grab the robots off screen, but it didn't go too well. But mainly I would say focus on trying to get to that boss. If you can grab one of the enemies, do the spinning throw to throw it at the boss as well. You can also get regular punches in on the boss when he tries to charge at you. He gets caught up in your punches. So you can try to do that. I was getting good damage with that as well, so you can use that as well on the boss. And, you know, when you get those screen clearing attacks, use them. Try not to get hit too much so you can save up that meter. And use it, because it does do a little bit of damage on the boss. It can be enough to do some chip damage and finish him off. It doesn't do a lot of damage, but it all adds up. So now you're on the final stage. I think there is a challenging long encounter in this level before the final boss. But yeah, it shouldn't be anything too extreme if we've gotten this far. The boss can be a little tricky, but I didn't find it too hard. I got in a rhythm with it. I only died once on hard on the last boss, so you know, after only playing through normal twice, I didn't find the last boss to be that difficult. It's just a matter of kind of planning when you know what enemies you're going to throw at the boss and trying to stay in the middle. But yeah, here you're going to deal with more robots and other assholes, so try to deal with the robots first if you can. Or just clear out all these other assholes first, whatever you find easier. I should have probably cleared out those flying drones sooner, because they're annoying. But I kind of ignored them for a while. But you know, use your nunchucks to clear them out. Throw these vehicles at these assholes. Yeah, nothing too hard there. It does go on for a while, but it's all manageable. This may be the room that goes on for a while. I can't remember where the long... There was one checkpoint that was long in here. It might only be this one, but I think there may be a longer encounter. You can do good damage with those containers, so make sure you throw those at the enemies. You may actually have to clear out all these enemies too before you get the next checkpoint, so maybe that's what I was thinking why it was so long. I think you have to clear out, you know, all these waves of enemies and all, you know, everything so far you have to beat to get to the next checkpoint, so that might be why it was so long. You see my health is starting to get low, so you do have to do it. You know, it's kind of an endurance fight. I think I did die once on that previous room. May have died in this area too. This may be a tricky area, but I can't remember. You have a lot of these suit-wearing enemies in this area, but they're easy to deal with. A lot of times you can just let them jump down and attack first and then just counter them. It's an easy way to deal with them. But you can also just rush them and beat the shit out of them a lot of times. I'm not sure how I did that power wave move. I think if you let your meter charge long enough, you can do it. Again, there's no move list for this game, so I wasn't always sure about all the moves. But yeah, again, we're dealing with more of these robots, so it's going to be similar tactics. And like I said, if you're having trouble grabbing them, save up your nunchuck special and use that. It does decent damage. While the robots are exploding during their transformation, after you damage them enough, they can't hurt you. So you can get right in the middle of them and get ready to grab them as soon as they become active again, and you won't get hurt. So that's an easy way to continue the abuse. These knife guys only take one hit, but there's a lot of them, so they can be annoying because they'll crouch and stab you and do other sneaky shit. So they do cover the robot pretty well. So sometimes you may want to clear them out with one of your specials, so you can get to that robot and slam it. See, while he's exploding, you can just wait for him to finish exploding animation, and then you'll be ready to grab him and slam him. Yeah, this is a pretty long room with a lot of robots and enemies. I think I remember this area being challenging as well. These are a little bit of endurance areas, but once you get into a rhythm with dealing with all the enemies, you shouldn't be getting hit that much. Just try to stay in the middle and crowd control everyone, pretty much. And of course, you can use the enemies as projectiles against the robots too. It doesn't do a lot of damage, but it will keep them off of you. Give you some breathing room. There's some health in here if you need it, because there's still, I think, quite a few enemies left to deal with. So you wouldn't want to die here. But yeah, save the health for when you need it, because you got to deal with another one of these guys. Which, as I was saying, try to stay in that sweet spot. And if you get hit, move and readjust your positioning to get in that sweet spot. You've already dealt with numerous of these guys. See, my health was getting low here, but I was able to grab that energy tank. Because otherwise, if you die here, I think you have to do this entire room over again, which is a pretty long, stretch of enemies. But I believe after you kill this guy and all these little trolls is the end of this room. So finish up, this area. And then very soon you're going to be on the final boss. I think there's one more room of enemies before the final boss, so it's not too bad. It's actually a very easy room to deal with because you can get all the enemies in one corner and just keep mashing punch and destroy them all very easily. So you pretty much should have full health before the final boss fight. This is the final checkpoint of the game, and if you die on the boss, you'll start back here. As you can see in my edit, because I did die once on the boss. So yeah, move all these guys to the right side of the screen, and now just stand like this and just punch in the direction that the enemies are approaching from. You know what I mean? The nunchucks hit on both sides, so you don't even have to face the enemies behind you with this guy. Because that nunchuck is slapping their fucking asses, so don't worry about that. And like I said, you should barely lose any health or maybe not even get hit at all on this part. So you should have most of your health. Just keep punching one side of the screen pretty much at this point. You know, this boss can be a little tricky, but you're going to be using the spin throw move. So it's going to be all about trying to get the guys to come to you and positioning yourself to the right distance away from the chamber with the bald asshole in it. Because if you're not positioned correctly, you'll do the toss, but it won't hit where it needs to hit at to damage him. So you'll get used to the positioning. So just keep throwing at that little cockpit. And I believe you can adjust the direction of the launch when you launch the enemy by holding one of the upper diagonals, upper left or upper right diagonal when you release it. But I wasn't completely sure about that because sometimes I thought I had it down and I threw the wrong way. So I'm still not 100%, but I believe that's how it's done. I was on a good roll for most of this fight, but then I started getting a little sloppy near the end. But that is the basic idea. Now, if you can grab one of these robots and spin throw them, it does multiple hits worth of damage on that cockpit. I believe it does more. See, it does more damage. I don't know if it hit properly that time, but it can do more damage to that cockpit than spin throwing a regular enemy. So, something to keep in mind. He does take a lot of hits, but I mean, it's pretty easy once you get into a rhythm. When you see those red lasers, obviously move the fuck out. You know, don't be in there like that, because then you'll take damage. But there's nothing in this fight that does massive damage to you. It's just, you know, taking a lot of damage over the course of the fight, since it takes a little while. See, I threw the wrong way that time, and I'm not always sure why that happens, but either way, it's really not that hard. Yeah, so that's it. It's just, you know, crowd control, staying in the middle. Let me know if you have any questions, and thanks for watching.